Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 2, Episode 1, Witch Trial. Episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happens within this episode. The episode opens with Phoebe returning home, very excited, and she walks in on Piper and Rob making out on the couch. Rob is a representative of the bank that is potentially going to give Piper a loan in order for her to be able to buy the club that she wants to run. And then Prue also comes home. Rob is sent away. Phoebe is excited that it is their anniversary of becoming witches, as they became witches 1 year ago in the show's time. And the other sisters aren't quite as enthusiastic as she is, and their conversation then gets interrupted by Jenny, who is a girl who has moved in next door alongside her uncle Dan, while her parents are away in Saudi Arabia, and she comes over to use their phone to try to call her parents, with her uncle following, and then they quickly leave once she's unable to get through to her parents. And then we fast forward to the next morning where Phoebe sees the book's pages quickly turning, and she calls Prue and Piper to come take a look as well. And when they get there, she reads out that there is a rite of passage and they need to fight it with the power of one. And just as she's read that, a portal opens up into the wall of the attic and the demon Abraxas steals the Book of Shadows, which of course sends them into a panic, and we see that Prue freezes, unable to stop this from happening. We then have basically an update on the sisters' lives. Piper goes to the site of her club to meet Rob, who at first agrees to give her the loan. However, because Abraxas, who has stolen the Book of Shadows, is reading it backwards, it starts to undo all of the magic that the sisters have done to date, and Jeremy, who is the first warlock that they had vanquished, appears, unvanquished, and knocks Rob out. Piper quickly calls her sisters, puts them on the phone, on the speakerphone, so that they can all chant the Power of Three spell and revanquish him. Prue is struggling with some survivor's guilt in this episode, and she spends more time at work at the auction. Phoebe is really pushing for them to become closer as witches, and now that the book is missing and Jeremy has reappeared, Piper and her go to an equinox celebration amongst Wiccan practitioners to speak to Stevie, who Phoebe had met at one of the occult stores that they frequent, and participate in a ritual there, asking Stevie like more information about, you know, how the equinox impacts their anniversary. Once they return home from that, then the Woogie Man is reversed, and and Piper and Phoebe have to revanquish it. While she's at work, Prue is attacked by Nicholas, who once again they need to revanquish. And then Prue kind of questions whether they should remain witches and is reluctant to try to get their powers back. Her and Phoebe have an argument, have a bit of a fight, but then she goes and speaks to Daryl. When she returns from speaking to Daryl, she then... Oh my goodness, what am I thinking? What do I want to say? When she returns, so Daryl has a message from Andy that he left to her, telling her basically not to blame herself. It was his choice to show up. He knows that that is a decision that he made himself, and whatever happened then is not her fault. She, of course, says that it's too late. She already blames herself. And then she comes back to the house, joins the sisters in creating a portal in the attic in order to summon Abraxas to fight him. But then once again, even though she had felt she was ready, she freezes up. Her sisters, of course, after they fail, follow her around, and she basically breaks down at this point with her grief over Andy, and Phoebe gives her, through their fighting, a little bit of a pep talk about how, yes, being witches and not having a normal life is the impact, and that did result in Andy dying. However, think of all the good that they have done, all the good that they will still do. Being witches is worth that, blah, blah, blah. And they basically hug it out. And then, because they're able to hug it out, they then all connect, and they're able to all hear Grams's voice telling them about the power of three, and they decide that it's just in time. They head to where they had done the equinox celebration earlier that day with Phoebe and Piper, and in order to catch Abraxas off guard, they go to that location to basically say the spell that called their powers originally on repeat, and this, of course, brings the book back from the dimension that Abraxas exists in, and then the book itself manages to vanquish Abraxas. When they bring the book home, they then are greeted by Grams, who they are now able to see as a ghost, and it turns out that she had been there the entire time. They just weren't ready to see her. And the fact that they're able to see her now shows how they are growing and how one day they may be ready to learn even more about their powers and their gifts. And then when Prue goes and looks at the book, she sees that the rite of passage had an additional line: fight with the power of one, or an even greater evil will await them. So it's a good thing that Phoebe didn't read that in the morning. And then, of course, as Grams once again disappears, they then see a page where she says, "Happy anniversary, my darlings." And that is how we round out this episode. All right, and then on this channel, after we rewatch the episode, I rank the episode on two lists: a mostly objective ranking list and then a personal ranking list. The mostly objective is emotionless, but bias and judgment can apply, and on the personal ranking, that is the emotional list. All right, so because this was the first episode of the second season, there was a lot that applied to the mostly objective ranking list seen in this episode. So starting small with our single episode supporting character introduction, we briefly meet Rob, who is a bank representative, and then the evil being for this episode was the demon Abraxas. We then get our multi-episode supporting character introductions, and these will be recurring characters throughout this season. We have Jenny, who is a girl that is living with her uncle while her parents are working for I think she says Department of Defense. Anyway, they have a government job and they're in Saudi Arabia. And then we have Dan, who is the real next door neighbor who has bought the house next door to the Hallowell sisters, and spoilers, is a future love interest. Then we have our supporting relationship development, which has to do in this case with Piper and Rob. I don't feel good about this relationship, so I'm glad it's only brief. But essentially, Phoebe walks in on Rob and Piper making out on the couch at the start of the episode. We then see them kissing goodbye. We see them meeting at the club the next day, and once again, they are kissing, showing, of course, that they have a relationship brewing here. However, he is the person that Piper is trying to get a loan from. We'll talk more on that in a couple points. The next one that we have is successful emotional impacts in the episode. Obviously, in the end of the last season, we lost Andy, and we are showing Prue going through her grieving process in this episode, and we see her breaking down about how losing Andy has affected her. She first has a mini breakdown with Daryl, and then later she has a full breakdown with her sisters. We also have the introduction of ghosts and spirits, of Penny in this case. We do see others of the family later, but Penny is the one in this one, and they start by being able to hear her voice, and each of them starts to hear her voice as they connect more to their powers. And once they've connected fully with their powers, they're all able to hear her, and once they have defeated Abraxas, they are then able to see her, which she says is a milestone because she has been there. Whenever the book was moving pages on its own, she was helping out. That was her way of watching over them, and she was the one turning the pages with her powers as a ghost. So the fact that they can now see her shows how they have connected to their powers more strongly, and that they are moving forward on their journey and will eventually be able to learn even more about that side of their magic, and them being able to see their Grams, whom they obviously loved and had lost just before the first episode aired. Well, just before the first episode in the series. Um, Obviously was very impactful and emotional for them. We then get our multi-season main character development, which of course is that Piper, who had quit her job at the end of the last season, in this season is now being shown to be working on loans in order to try to buy a club, which is less risky than opening a restaurant, which is why she has chosen to go with a club instead of the restaurant, which is her dream. But she doesn't want to work for anyone else. She wants to be her own boss, and that is why she has decided now to try to open a club, and she needs $60,000 to do it. We then get our multi-season main character growth, which of course comes from Prue and her grieving process. At the start of the episode, she's kind of frozen and unable to use her powers when the book is stolen. And then once it is stolen, she's kind of reluctant to team up to go and get it back. In fact, she decides that she'd rather go to work. When she's at Buckland's, she does meet a widow who is auctioning her husband's collection and his estate. And through speaking to the widow, she kind of learns a bit more about loss and has somebody who understands her loss. Though obviously, like, she wasn't a widow to Andy, but they had admitted that they were in love just before he died. We then, of course, see after that that she is then reluctant to save their powers, suggesting that perhaps letting Abraxas remove their powers will allow them to live a normal life again. They won't have demons and warlocks coming after them. They won't have to watch anyone else that they love die in front of them. However, as the sisters point out, Phoebe and Piper, if he did manage to get their powers, probably Abraxas would come and kill them. So it would be a death sentence. And they tried to convince Prue of that, but she is convinced that if they don't have their powers, they're not a threat. They can live a normal life again, just like they had while their powers were bound. And that is what she hopes. And then she continues to grieve and she visits Daryl, who gives her a message that Andy left with him before he died. And he had told to Daryl that basically, if something were to happen to him, to tell Prue that basically it was his decision. She was not at fault. He chose to go there on his own. It was his free will being exercised, and she should not feel guilty about it. Of course, she then tells and reveals to Daryl that she does feel guilty about it in that she wasn't able to save him, so she essentially is suffering from survivor's guilt. And then we arrive at her not wanting to let her sisters down. She shows up after her talk with Daryl, more confident in trying to get the book back. However, once again, once they open a window to Abraxas's dimension through the attic, she once again freezes and is unable to use her ability to move objects and is feeling the pressure because they keep thinking that fighting Abraxas with the power of one means it has to be Prue who is the strongest, but is the one that right now is going through it emotionally, and it does not feel like she is that one. And then, Piper and Phoebe are like, "What were you doing? This was our chance. How could you freeze up?" And she basically goes on, she has a breakdown about, They keep saying it's her. She doesn't feel like it's her. She's worried about Andy. She doesn't want to lose someone she loves. She doesn't even know she wants to have powers. So on and so forth. A complete breakdown. She's willing to give her powers up. She's kind of in that state of being done. But then Phoebe kind of enters her therapist mode and tells her, I know we lost Andy and I know that is hard for you, but do not forget all of the innocents that we have saved, all the innocents we will save, all of the good that we have yet to do and have done. That is not erased by losing Andy. And we need to get her powers back. Prue finally kind of has her realization and that, in fact, Phoebe is right. There is still a lot that they have to do with their powers, that losing one person doesn't erase all of the people that they have saved and will save in the future. And so she agrees, and they're cutting it close because they only had until the end of the equinox, which was sunrise, and that's coming up real soon. They decide because Abraxas will know that they are coming if they use the window in the attic again, they decide to go to a ritual um, altar that's in the middle of the woods that they had gone to that morning for the Wiccan ritual with the other women from the occult shop who practice the Wiccan religion but aren't necessarily magical witches. And there they kind of hold hands around this altar, the three of them, and they recite the spell that gave them their powers originally from the first episode of season 1, and they repeat it a few times, which ends up connecting them to the book and calling the book back to them, and it does fall and land on the altar. And then Abraxas, of course, follows the book, opening up a portal above the altar, and he, of course, is like, "What are you doing? Why are you trying to take your book back?" Obviously, they would try to take the book back. But because Prue has connected to her magic and so has everybody else, and they've all heard Grams's voice at this point, they are able to get the book back. The power of one was never Prue alone, it was the three of them working as one. And she becomes part of that one after she accepts her grief and gets some closure with regards to her emotions and survivor's guilt in regards to Andy. So she has a nice growth subplot throughout the entire episode, essentially. We then, of course, get a little bit of world building in that we have the fact that there is a rite of passage on their 1-year anniversary. And I imagine the reason it doesn't happen in the future season 4 is most likely because Abraxas was vanquished by them in this episode. Otherwise, maybe there would have been another rite of passage for Paige. Just a spoiler. And then we have Jeremy, who obviously they killed right away. In the original first episode, he froze. However, in this episode, it is indicated that some baddies are strong enough that over time they will adjust to Piper's freezing power and be able to fight it. So she will be able to freeze them the first time, but then they'll unfreeze when she tries again. They'll freeze for a little bit shorter of a time, and then a little bit shorter, and then they may be able to throw it off altogether, which hasn't really happened before. There were some evils that were too strong to freeze. And then there was, of course, those that froze. This is the first time we're really seeing people being able to fight her freezing power. And then, of course, we have the introduction of ghosts and spirits of their family members. We have seen evil spirits with the Alcatraz episode, Power of Two, but that was an evil spirit that they had to vanquish, so therefore evil. This is the first time we're seeing that spirits who have moved on are still able to appear for their loved ones if they are on the good side and were magical. So that is all of our positives, and we are way up there on our score. So even with the negatives that are coming up next, it's not really going to make a difference to the score, to be honest. But I'm still going to go over them anyways. So next up, we of course have the fact that it is a setup or recap episode. I don't like those. I find that the repetition tends to be boring. Now, that being said, as far as recap episodes go, this one was pretty good. They only spent brief periods of time with the exposition. We got, a little sampling of some of the evils that they had defeated in the previous season. Not really, in my opinion, apart from the Woogie, because Is There Woogie in the House was one of my favorite episodes, was there really much to say about them. Like, I mean, Jeremy, he fell flat in the original. Nicholas was recast, and it's like there were plenty of people to choose from. You could have chosen Javna. He was full prosthetics. Maybe that would have been a better option. But that was my own personal um, thing, and I'll talk more about that on the personal side. There obviously was, to me, a negative messaging and behavior. The fact of the matter is, Piper's trying to get a loan from Rob, who was one of the bank representatives, and she was willing to engage in physical intimacies with him for that purpose, which is very unethical. She was willing to compromise her integrity to get the money, and we see that that was the case because as soon as he is attacked by Jeremy in the club and is taken away, he basically is no longer interested in Piper because he's now decided he's not giving her the loan. And then later on, when Piper is informed that her loan is denied, it isn't even him who calls her, it's the assistant. So basically, he was sleeping with her because he knew that she wanted the loan, and she was going to basically compromise her integrity in order to sleep with him to get the loan. And that was kind of icky, and she even mentions herself, good thing I didn't end up sleeping with him. And as an audience member, I'm like, good thing you didn't compromise your integrity, because that seems out of character for Piper, to be honest. But it did rub me the wrong way, and I was like, Which also brings us to the supporting relationship regression or breakup, which of course is the fact that after Rob was attacked by Jeremy, he withdraws the loan and his feelings from Piper, never to be seen again. Again, gave me an icky feeling. And then the last one, people may disagree with me on this one, but Jenny as a character isn't really likable. She's kind of a weak character, in my opinion. Like a weakly crafted character that, spoilers, she does tend to cause some trouble in future episodes, and obviously, like, the kind of preteen tween sort of characters, for me, they almost always come out annoying because they're still child enough that you're like, they're a child actor and those aren't really great, but then they're also old enough that they're able to cause trouble, not listen, enter the rebellious phase, and just be overall annoying. And Jenny does fall into that category. She is overall annoying. So I personally don't really like the character. I'm glad that she only recurs for a few episodes before her parents come back to get her. Dan sticks around longer, obviously because he has a romantic interest. But typically, when a character is one that I don't like, I typically will, when they are introduced, indicate that they are a weak or dislikable character. And while she didn't do anything dislikable in this specific episode, overall she is a dislikable character, and rather than give the weak or dislikable in every single episode, I'm just giving it once with the character introduction to say that's that. However, as I said, with all the negatives, it still doesn't bring us down below 10, so this one is a 10 out of 10 episode for the premiere of season 2. Alright, so in our season 2 rankings so far, on our mostly objective ranking, we only have one episode in the season so far, therefore, in first place is Witch Trial. So overall, just as a general note for the personal ranking, the general themes that I got from this episode was one of the we're grieving and we're going through a grieving process and we get to go along for that ride. We get that they are hitting new milestones in their personal life with Piper's Club and picking up kind of where the previous season left off, but not right away. In the universe of Charmed, it's mentioned that they've been demon free for a month and a half or so. So we're at least that far from the previous episode. of the last season. With that, of course, means that there's also the fact that they kind of have to catch us up on where they've been since. And also, like I said, it is a bit of a like a greatest hits, though they didn't pick the greatest of the hits to go through. Like I said at season one, episode one, Jeremy as a character was very poorly written. I'm sorry. He really was. They put like no effort into his character at all. It was basically he met Piper off screen. They flirt really badly and about beautiful things. And then, he's the evil. And then when he comes to kill them, he's basically giving them a speech about how, well, you know what? You're killing me right now. But, in the future, there's going to be other people who come after you. There's so many of us. So you may be killing me now and I'm dead, but guess what? I'm not the last. Okay, now I'll die. That was basically his purpose, was basically to give us a little bit of a speech and exposition on the fact that there's going to be more. And that's the premise of the show establishing itself. So poorly written. So the fact that they chose Jeremy of all the warlocks to bring back and all the demons to bring back, well, I think it was a choice and I'm not sure why it was made. Honestly. Then you have, of course, the Woogie in the house, and the Woogieman was one of my favorite episodes. I have no complaints about that one, though I did find it a little bit like Phoebe is the one who the story resonated with the most. Phoebe is the one who wrote the spell into the book. Phoebe is the one that knew the spell off by heart very well. And yet, in this episode, suddenly she can't remember it. She's forgotten it. And I'm sitting there like, she's the one who knew it. Like, if it had been Prue and Piper that were together, I could understand them working together to try to remember the spell. But Phoebe, given the episode Is There Woogie in the House and her connection to the spell and how she was the one who truly believed in it, had seen it as a child, it had resonated with her and she had it memorized, should not have forgotten most of the spell. Like, I feel like that was like a character. I didn't go so far as to call it a character regression on the rank values because it was so minor, but it was a little bit of a regression of the character because we know she knows the spell. She's the one who wrote it into the book. So that annoyed me a little bit. And then of course we have Nicholas, and they recast him with a different actor. And no shade to the new actor, but I'm like, you had an entire season's worth of villains to choose from to come back. You didn't have to choose Nicholas. If the original actor was not able to recur because they had, you know, something else going on in life or just simply didn't want to, there were other villain options. One that comes to mind would have been the Wendigo, because that's prosthetics. So even if the original actress didn't recur, you could at least have somebody in the prosthetics, a new person, and nobody would even know. Javna, the older version of Javna, is again full prosthetics. You could have had somebody else in those prosthetics. Nobody would have known that they were recast. Like, it wouldn't have been obvious. You could have chosen. Well, those are the two examples that really just came to mind, like to the front of my mind, but I'm sure you could find others where there were evils that they could have brought back in recast that people wouldn't have known. So the decision to recast, specifically to have Nicholas, when Nicholas wasn't even a standout villain because that episode he appeared in was really more about the family and meeting Patty and Penny, was again, like, I'm like, why was that decision made? Of all the villains from season one that you could have brought back, why did you choose to bring back one that you had to recast so it didn't even look like him? Oh, well, actually, the actor that they recast with did look similar. Similar, though, not identical, obviously. So, again, like, why was that decision made? It's a bit of a flaw for me in that. And then, of course, that's the main negative, really, that bothered me. But I really don't like recap episodes anyways, so par for the course. Anywho, continuing on, I really liked the fact that Grams's voice was heard by each of the sisters as they connected more strongly to their magic. Phoebe was the first one to be able to hear it because she is the one that at this point loves being a witch the most and could hear her first. At the altar, she heard Graham's and Piper couldn't because Piper had yet to connect. However, once they were at the club and Piper was facing Jeremy again, she managed to connect to her magic more strongly and she was able to hear Graham's. And for Prue, who had the hardest struggle within this episode of them potentially not keeping their powers, which honestly is a recurring theme throughout the series at certain points. Spoilers. I really should say spoilers beforehand, but I don't have a script, so I don't actually know when I'm going to give spoilers to be able to do that. Anywho, once again, I like the progression of hearing Graham's voice, and then once they have all connected, they get their powers back, save the Book of Shadows. I love that they're able to see her and that that is a visual representation of the growth that they go through in the episode. And of course, for me, the magic of Charmed really is the family's story. I mean, it's great that they get to kick butt every episode. Congratulations, you're kick ass, but I myself really connect with the family aspect, the family drama, the relationship dramas, the sisters' interactions, and the sisters' journeys as characters. That's what I personally have always tuned in for. So, of course, when family members recur, such as Patty or Graham's, also known as Penny, I really love those episodes, and I really find that those are the emotional impacts that tend to get me the most because of how strongly they connect to the family and that family story. So obviously, I really enjoyed that they did that to show their magical growth as well. And then also, Daryl in the first season was Andy's partner. He showed up every so often, usually directly to Andy, not necessarily the sisters. And so we didn't really get to know much about Daryl. And even in this episode, we still haven't gotten much development from Daryl, though I do know that that does come in the future, obviously. He becomes very close to the sisters and learns their secret eventually, as he is a character that goes all the way through to season 8. But having said that, I did find the moment with Prue to be very heartwarming. That he had been trying to reach out to her, but she had been avoiding him because of the guilt she felt, and how he is being as supportive for her as he was for Andy because he knew about how Andy felt, and he was able to deliver the message that Andy left him. There's also a bit of a pulling on heartstring moment when they see Andy's cleared away desk because Daryl hasn't been given a new partner yet. The desk is still empty. And of course, this is painful for Prue, but also for Daryl, who you imagine has to come in every day to the office, see that empty desk across from him that Andy used to sit in, that his partner sat in, and know that his partner died tragically on the job, like not even on the job while he was suspended. And obviously, that also was an emotional moment. And I did like that for the characters. We got to see that even though we didn't really see it in season 1, it does look like Daryl did have an emotional connection to the sisters because, Prue apologized for not being there to comfort him. She knows he lost Andy too. He's wondering why she didn't come see him, all this other stuff. So it's laying the foundation for the fact that it has a pre-relationship and that hopefully that'll make more sense when he does develop more as a character coming in to kind of fill Andy's shoes, just not as a love interest. He already has a family, a wife, and a son, Daryl Jr. So overall, I felt there was a lot of positives. There was also negatives. Strong episode overall, though. I gave it an 8 out of 10. And of course, our season 2 rankings so far, there's only one, and that is this episode, The Witch Trial. Now, if you've made it this far, thank you for listening to all of my rambling. And we'll begin with our series rankings so far. So, this season has 22 episodes, and each episode can score a maximum of 10 points, leading to a maximum potential score of 220. And season 1 ended with, on the mostly objective ranking, a total score of 73.18%. And with season 2, we are adding 10% to, or not 10%, 10 points to our total, and we'll be able to figure out the percentage at the end of this season. But right now, season 1 is in first place, as season 2 has not been completed yet. And then on the personal side, season 1 came in at 71.50%. And on the season 2 calculation, we are adding 8 points for a total of 8 out of 220 so far. With that, we have now rewatched and ranked Charmed season 2, episode 1, Witch Trial. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.